just want to make sure that everybody knows if it's okay to record today. We're recording. We do this for, thank you. Anybody have any objections? Oh, so.
If you have objections, it's too bad.
It's too bad. All right. Okay.
Because it was mentioned in the event
okay.
that this is recorded. So.
Oh, all right. Okay. So
Don't ask questions. James is here. If you start asking questions, it's going to open up a whole can of worms. So okay. It's how it is, folks.
Right. If you don't like the recording, you can leave in an empathetic way. All right.
Jump head first out the window.
Okay. All right, well, let's start with introductions, and I'll just go around my screen. And Edwin, just you want to start?
Yeah, I'm Edwin Rutch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's me.
Yeah, and I'm Bill Filler. I've been working with Edwin for about 2 years. Oops. And and I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thanks, Sophia.
Yeah, I'm Sophia. I'm from southern Sweden, and yeah, I'm a regular participant.
Great, welcome
in
back.
Circles. Thank you.
Sure. And James.
Oh, I'm James. I do the joining game, and I'm in Syracuse, New York.
Great, thanks, James. Pavel.
So I'm Pavel. I'm new to the empathy circles, and at the moment I'm taking a training for a facilitator, and that's all.
Great, welcome. Aoife.
Hi, I'm Aoife. I'm in Ireland, and I've also been doing the facilitator training and coming to these meetings for a while now.
Great. Brian?
Hey everyone, I'm Brian. I'm from Ottawa, Canada. This is my third empathy circle. And I'm also signed up for the next facilitator training.
Great. Alex.
Hey, I'm Alex. I'm on Treaty 7 lands in southern Alberta, Western Canada. I'm with XR Calgary, just going through the 10 Principles Cafe series. Very much enjoying it.
Great to have you. Me too.
Hi, I'm Neetu. I'm a former medical graduate studying psychiatry, and I've started facilitating empathy circles recently. Nice to meet you.
Great, thanks. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm an educator and also with Green Party.
Great. And Courtney?
Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm from New York City. I'm a physician and a public health student, and I'm new to the empathy circles.
Great, welcome. And Anne.
Hi, I'm Anne. I'm in Minehead in England, and I've been facilitating some empathy circles for a few weeks now. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Okay, well, we're doing a series on COVID, and now we're switching to the principles of a culture of empathy. And Edwin is going to give us an introduction into those, and we'll be discussing those in the breakout room. So I'll turn it over to Edwin.
Yeah, thanks. So as Bill said, that this group has had different topics since we had the COVID situation. We've been talking about that is our topic, how to have mutual support. And we do want to now shift to a different topic, and the topic is what are the underlying values of a culture of empathy? So we've had a group, Bill, myself, Lou, Swire, Carolina, and Martha. We've been meeting on a regular basis, trying to articulate what the 10 underlying values of a culture of empathy are. And a culture of empathy being a culture that is founded on the value of empathy. So it's very much based on what we're doing here in the empathy circles. Like I would consider these empathy circles as sort of a mini cultures of empathy. And we've come up with, values like mutuality, openness, presence, curiosity, collaboration, trust. So there's a bunch of different values we've come up with, and I find that every time I share this with others, they have other values that they think are core to culture based on empathy. So our first, in this series, we're just going to have it be an open topic. Like, what do you see as a foundational core value of an empathic society? And so we're going to just, you know, go into breakout rooms and, you know, just talk about that. So it's like, what does the value mean to you? If you think it's mutuality, what does that value mean to you? What are your experiences with it? How does it relate to building a culture of empathy? How does it relate to empathy circles and so forth? So it's pretty open. So we're just sort of doing an exploratory exploration here of these values. And also I might mention that a little bit of a difference between a value and a principle. Usually a value is like this core essence, like a word like love or mutuality or openness. And a principle is sort of a rule of how you manifest that or how you actualize that. It's usually like a one sentence rule, I'd say. And so that's it. You know, I started 14 years ago. I started the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. So this has really been central to kind of the work that I've been doing. It's also looking at empathy, not just from a individualistic point of view. Often we look at empathy like, oh, I will empathize with someone else, and if you're doing it well or not. And a culture of empathy is looking at what is the overall culture that we live in, and what is the level of empathy within that culture. And if we want an overall culture, society based on empathy, you know, what are the subcomponents of that? So I don't know if you want to add something, Bill. Any other thoughts about that?
No, this is an explanation, exploration, I'm sorry, that we've really been going on, and we welcome you to join us in it. And that's it. And I noticed that there are a few new people. Do we want to go through a circle explanation or roles?
Yeah, I think we should, for any new people, just a quick introduction, like how the empathy circle works. I think most people know it. But.
Right. I'll go through it very quickly. And then generally what we do, if you're new to the process, it's very simple. And then in your breakout room, facilitators, you can model it for the newcomers, and then you'll quickly catch on, I'm sure. So there are basically 4 roles. There is the speaker, and the speaker speaks whatever's on their mind. They can talk about the subject or anything else that happens to be working them. Tips for the speaker is to kind of pause periodically, because your listener will have to reflect that. And we use time limits here. We're going to go for 5 minutes so that everybody has a chance to participate. And then there's the role of the active listener. And this is the kind of tricky part. And the active listener reflects what they hear the speaker say without any sort of judgment, encouragement, asking questions, follow up. If you have a reaction to it, when it's your turn to be speaker, then you can then express whatever you feel like. But as an active listener, we're really trying to, I forget exactly who coined the phrase, but walk a mile in their shoes, feel into what the person's doing, and try to give as pure a reflection of that as possible. The other people are passive listeners, and they should be tracking the conversation and just thinking about it, and because a lot of things are triggered there. And then they'll have a turn. Once the speaker speaks, he passes the speakership on to the active listener. The active listener picks somebody else to listen, and then we go around the circle and stuff. It's good to go around, make sure everybody gets a turn, and also that you try to speak with different people as you can. Facilitator's role is just to kind of keep you in the process. It is a bit awkward. It's not quite a regular conversation. So if the facilitator corrects you, it's not a criticism of you or your ideas, but it's just an attempt for us to keep you in the process so you can experience it. Even more than the content, there's something else going on in the emotional level, we believe. and that's deeper. And we want you to be able to experience that. Generally, there'll be, you know, a timer, and then I have this, finally, this is artisanal, handcrafted time thing that I put up there, and various things. Okay, I think we're about ready.
Okay, so circle 1 is Bill, facilitation, 2 is Nitu, and 3 is Anne. Is that okay? Okay. So
one question though. Am I recording in circle 1?
I'll be recording in the circle.
Okay.
I'll be in the circle and be recording.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
so I think we're ready to go. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're going for about how long?
Well, we go for 2 hours, so I have 10, 11. This is Pacific time, so we should be going for about an hour and 45 minutes or so.
Okay, great.
Or something like that.
And then we'll come back to the full group and debrief.
Yeah,
and
about an hour and a half. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, opening the rooms. Here we go. And we have 5-minute turns too. You get just so.
Okay. So Pavel, you're comfortable with the process? Do you feel you know enough about it? Yeah. Okay.
I feel comfortable enough. Yes. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, just to do the roles. Okay. So let's dive into it. I invite anyone not named Bill to start the first speaker and then pick a listener.
And the topic is, what are the values of a culture of empathy?
Yep. Right, or whatever's working in that topic.
I'm going to start.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, were you going to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll start if it's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll speak to you, Edwin.
Listening.
Okay, so one value of a culture of empathy is that I never want to ask other people to do something that I don't or won't do myself. And this is a hypothesis. I'm not sure if I could live up to that, but that's my hypothesis to start with. And
so you've got a hypothesis that you would not ask someone else to do something that you wouldn't do yourself.
That's right.
And that's like a value within a culture of empathy.
That's right. It's the understanding that I want to know what would it be like to be in their shoes if I was in their shoes and someone was to ask me to do this thing. What would it mean to me? Would I be willing to do it? Would I have a problem with it? Everything that comes along with that.
Mm-hmm. So it's like if you have a request of someone, you would want to know what that request would mean for you, how you would react to it and understand it. So, and not kind of make a request of someone that you wouldn't want that made of you either.
Yes. And I also know that this is really a goal, and it may be even impossible to live up to, but yet still valuable to me. So that I love it when someone comes to me and says, you asked me to do X or not to do X, and then you did the opposite thing. There's plenty of I know plenty of examples where that has happened to me, and I loved that being brought to my awareness.
Mm-hmm. So it's like you've had examples where people you've made a request of someone, but then you've done the thing yourself. Maybe you requested that they don't do something, and then you've done it yourself, and you have like an appreciation. Oh, thanks for showing me that I was sort of inconsistent with my own requests.
Yes, it helps me when they bring that to me. Then it helps me think, okay, either I want to to somehow bring myself into integrity by either loosening my asking them not to do it, or getting on the same. Somehow I want to integrate the fact that there are there's this inconsistency, and yeah.
Yeah, so it's really about trying to get past the inconsistency of you making a request, but you do it, and that you would like it that you don't do the same thing. So what you're sort of requesting of others, it's not like if you're asking them to stop doing something, that you're not doing it yourself. You know, if they're
Yes.
interrupting, that you wouldn't be interrupting, or something, just something where you're kind of inconsistent, asking of others something that you're not willing to do yourself.
Yes. I know that this issue comes up for me personally all the time in relation to authority, that I would like, you know, I have all of these requests of authority, include me, consider me, blah, blah, blah. And I always try to think, if I was in the position of authority, would I be able to respond to the requests that I'm making, or would I, or not?
Yeah, so this is really salient around the issue of authority, because you're kind of like questioning authority, and now you're wondering, like, what would you do if you were in authority? How would you be, you know, what would you be doing? And are you consistent with your kind of criticisms or requests of authority? And so wanting a sense of integrity there.
Yeah.
So I guess integrity is almost like the value.
Absolutely. And integrity, the thing I like about the word integrity is that the root, it's the same root word as integration. And integration for me is the working out of differences. So I have two inconsistent differences inside of me, and I don't ask other people to create integrity. I create integrity by integrating those differences in myself in some way, either asking someone to come closer to me or going closer to them.
So you're saying that the root of integrity is sort of this integration, and it's like being integrated with yourself and maybe with others too. And
yes,
yeah.
And I hear that's my time. Thank you. I feel heard.
Oh yeah. Aoife, can I speak to you?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, yeah, that was interesting. I see integrity as a big part of a culture of empathy too, that empathy itself is an integrating sort of process, that we sort of integrate different parts of ourselves, and it kind of happens through this empathic awareness and dialogue.
So I hear you saying that that integrity is a very big part of what empathy, a culture of empathy, means to you. That, and then bringing it into the idea of integrating different aspects within the reflection, the sharing and the reflection to integrate.
Yeah, to integrate, first I have to be sensitive to the experience, the feelings, the felt experience of myself and others, and then that those experiences can sort of dialogue with each other. And there's sort of this integration that happens through that. So that's some kind of an understanding and integration that happens. So that hasn't been part of one of the values we were looking at before, but I have thought of it, you know, previously, that integration is yeah, core.
So you're saying that it's not something that you've spoken about before, but you
recently,
see it recently, that but it is a core part of the process, that the first thing is to actually stay with the felt experience, the feelings that are arising, and then allow them to integrate together.
Yeah. So, but the value that comes up for me is first step that I've been looking at. I don't have the word for it. I would call it feeling awareness. It's an awareness of the felt experience. And so it's since empathy means to feel into, that you have to first be sensitive and aware of the felt experience. I'm not quite sure what to call that. Right now I'm just calling it feeling awareness as a core value. It's an awareness of what I am feeling, you know, what you're feeling, what everyone's feeling, what the the feeling of the space here is.
So you're exploring this core value of felt awareness, and you're not quite sure how to define it, but there's like the empathic process is to feel into. So there's a sense of that there's this thing we're doing that you're not 100% sure how to label it.
Yeah, it's like I'm looking for, I don't see a word out. It's sort of based on the, you know, on Descartes, I think, therefore I am. It's instead, it's I feel, therefore I am. I think that they have like he started with a incorrect foundation premise. So the premise I'm starting with, and I think empathy starts with, is I feel, therefore I am. And then that means we have to be sensitive to, you know, our felt experience. And, you know, I've heard it's something like a technical term for it's been introception, I think is a term, but that's too awful of an academic term.
So there is this word introception, that feels too technical, but you're clear that there's a distinction between, you know, the Descartes thing, I think, therefore I am, and I feel, therefore I am. So the feeling is the most important thing to you within the process?
Yeah, and I can feel myself concentrating. I feel the concentration trying to, yeah. If I just get a reflection on that, maybe I'll be fully heard.
It comes to you as a feeling, it's a focused, a concentration that is very distinct.
No, at the moment, I'm noticing a feeling of concentration in myself.
Okay, so in this present moment, you're very aware of a feeling of concentration.
Yeah, I feel very heard. Thank you. There's a couple of people in the waiting room. I'm going to go and chat, just talk to them. I'll be right back. So.
Okay. Bill, would you listen to me?
Happily.
So my dog is here, if you can hear a noise.
Okay.
That is what's happening. She's licking. So yeah, I'm not long in from being out most of.
No, we're trying to be
Sorry. I meant enough. You came late to the rooms, so once the circles are already formed, it's too late to join. But the two of you, if others come, you can do your own empathy circle here, if that's okay. So
yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so you know how to do it, Sally. You can. Hi, Jolly. So yeah, there was somebody. I saw there was somebody else here. I thought you can just form a circle here.
I don't have a timer. If someone wants to be timer, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to the other room, which I was part of, but just, yeah, you got to come on time, because once the circles get formed, it becomes disruptive if new people join. So.
Well, thank you for letting us come on board anyway.
Sure. Well, you're sort of in the waiting room, so if other people come, you can facilitate a circle here with any other people that come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I can.
The feelings and the thoughts are part of what's happening. And then the listening to someone else. So there's those two things going on, the integration of the personal experience. And then that what Edwin was saying about the feeling into what's going on with somebody else. So that's a third aspect that I really appreciate about this. So I don't know, I suppose there's a willingness. There's a willingness to say, okay, here's my thoughts, here's my feelings. And then I have a willingness to engage with your thoughts and feelings. So I suppose willingness.
Okay, so reflecting upon what Edwin said, kind of talking about the thinking, feeling, instead of I think therefore I am. I feel, therefore I am. So you're talking about the cognitive and the emotional bodies within you. And then bringing the third element, which is listening to both those aspects in someone else. And you like that because that forces you to kind of expand and open up your awareness.
Yeah, and in the tradition I come from in Buddhism, like all of that is not self. So it's not, you know, the ultimate self, but it's still stuff that requires respect and, you know, responsibility for yourself and care for others. So kind of holding that too, that it's not self, but it is happening.
Okay, so you threw me a Zen curveball there. So it's not self. Let me see if I can get this. So essentially you're saying that in your tradition, the Buddhist tradition, that particular awareness of yourself, the emotional self, the cognitive self, and the both those and others is not the ultimate, but it's a sort of like a path towards a greater awareness. Did I get that right? At least in the ballpark?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
correct me, please. Yeah.
No, it's a part of it. It's definitely a part of it. It's I suppose it's how you relate to how I relate to what's happening, and it goes into the realm of projection and taking things personally, both your own experience and other people's. So yeah, that it helps to have. This process is helping me to find detachment from projection and taking things personally.
Okay, so you're talking about how this practice of the empathy, you know, empathic listening, helps you to not take things personally and to be aware of a greater social context. It's always kind of like, you know, not forcing you, but guiding you towards a greater awareness socially, and then of course that expands in other areas as well. So I would say spiritually as well for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, great. All right, Pavel.
Yes.
Wow, a lot of things. Well, a lot of, you know, culture of empathy. I'll paraphrase William Brennan when he talked about pornography. He said, "I can't define it, but I know it when I see it." And that's what I feel something about a culture of empathy. It's and I want to kind of riff off of what Aoife said and then Edwin. It's an integrated sort of awareness. It's gentle, it's inviting. There's a sense of when it's, you know, when people are participating in a culture of empathy, you can feel it, and it's not necessarily easily defined. I'll stop there.
So what I'm hearing is that it's not easy to describe what empathy is. It must be felt with your being.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. That's exactly it. And, you know, and to what James said, as far as like not asking someone else to do something, you know, and that is something you have to, in my job as a special education teacher, I had to deal with very volatile students. So I could have, you know, my assistants who thought I was nice enough, but weren't necessarily ready to put themselves in harm's way for me, just for me. I had to, number one, demonstrate that what we were doing was good for the student. And then number two, demonstrate that I was willing to take the same risk that I'm asking them to take. I'll stop there.
So you agree with James on the point that first you shouldn't do what you wouldn't do, and that you also should be example for how to treat others. Yeah.
So, and that's what I always tried to do. If it was just the power of my personality, that always is a bad that always has a bad outcome. But if you can put like the student's need as the authority and then demonstrate how we're all working for that, that really then creates buy-in. You know, people respect that. Whereas, sorry, go ahead.
So kind of you have to suppress your personal traits to some extent and put the needs of the student before yours, kind of, and not allow your personality to interfere with that.
Yeah, and to go back to what Aoife said, it actually is not, as you practice it, it's not really suppressing. You realize that there's a greater self, there's a greater existence when you incorporate the needs in this particular situation of the student, the assistant, and your team members you're working on. And when you do that, you actually become, I believe, a better person, at least for me, than I would have if I'm just sort of like sitting there in my ego trying to manipulate things. I'll stop there.
So the experience of putting others, in this case the students, as a priority, this whole experience changes you.
Right, and it actually creates greater strengths within me. So so rather than feeling I'm losing something, I'm sort of opening myself up to a new experience, one of the principles or values. And then rather than feeling like, oh, I lost something, I'm feeling like, wow, I've expanded my awareness. I'm actually more capable than I was before.
So this whole experience actually helps you to grow and expand yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Pavel, thanks. That wasn't easy. I feel fully heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, just to keep the ball rolling, James, would you listen to me?
Sure.
To begin with, I think it's very good that this topic of selecting values, the values behind culture of empathy, is quite important. As I can observe that in motivational interviewing, the spirit, which I believe it's the core values that makes motivational interviewing. And that's one of the reasons it made it so successful. It's like these core values, they're not only there, but they also serve as a principles to some extent, because they guide our actions, although they're not principles.
So you see overlap between the principles within motivational interviewing and with the culture of empathy.
Not exactly. I can see the importance of the values that they're being discussed and they're put in front of the people, so they're more aware of what values do we stand behind. But also the values of MI go very well with building a culture of empathy, in my opinion. Some of them, at least.
Okay.
I'm just gonna list some of the values.
Okay.
So acceptance, to accept the people as they are, that we do not judge them, criticize them, shame, or blame them. Then autonomy, we support the people's autonomy and we acknowledge it. Then we have compassion towards them. As a value also came out to me growth. So we have to be able to adapt and evolve. as the culture of empathy expands. So I think that that's also a key value. Respect, treat people with respect. Safety, to provide open space. Openness, tolerance, to respect and accept people who are different than you. Helpfulness, to be helpful to others. Forgiveness, to forgive someone that might have hurt you unintentionally, let's say during an empathy circle. Yeah, these are the values I came up with for today.
Yeah.
And
so you came up with a list of values: acceptance, autonomy, openness, tolerance, and a number of others, and that these are the values that you think are essential.
Yes. And I also wonder what are the values that you have discussed before. You mentioned that before that you had a meeting and you were discussing some of these values. In regards to what Edwin said, like, I feel, therefore I am. Sometimes to me it's very hard to relate to what the people are feeling, but I have kind of like understanding of what they're going through, but I don't feel it, you know. I'm still being empathic with them, but that feeling does not always go through me.
Yeah, so you often, related to Edwin's comment about I feel therefore I am, often you understand what someone is telling you intellectually, but you don't have a feeling of understanding or the same feeling.
Yeah, yes. And then I recently saw this guy who wrote the case against empathy, and it made me really frustrated in a sense, like how he can be taking it so much out of context. And in the end of the day, we have a rational mind to take a decision. And then when you're being empathic with someone, I think this gives you an opportunity to make a better decision and not be simply just guided by your emotion to do something and then in the end of the day do more harm. I don't know. I really would like to hear Edwin on the topic with just a sentence or two.
Yeah.
I just decided not to dive.
So it's,
yes.
Well, it's time. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just didn't know if you noticed it is time. Let me reflect that last part. You're thinking about the person who wrote the case against empathy. You feel frustrated about that. You think it was taken, well, you think that the whole understanding of empathy is being taken out of context. And you'd like, you'd like maybe somebody to speak to that more.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
All right. Aoife, would you listen to me?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. I love that these issues are coming up. These are many issues that are dear to my heart. In particular, the challenge of Descartes. I think, therefore I am. I have a different understanding than Edwin possibly on this. My understanding of feelings is that they are thoughts that they come up, they arise in the body as emotions, and then as soon as we give a word to them, they become thoughts. And the understanding of this is difficult. I mean, I admit that I don't understand a lot of it, but at least for starters, it's very important for me to integrate, talking about integration again, to integrate both my thinking energy and my feeling energy, and not to reject one or the other.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say that you are very welcoming of this topic because it's a lot of themes that are close to your heart, and that you perhaps have a different understanding of that "I think, therefore I am" quote, in that for you, thoughts and feelings aren't distinct from each other. They're kind of aspects of one movement, that an emotion comes up or a feeling comes up, and then a thought comes up in reaction to it or along with it.
Not exactly. Actually, they are distinct, which is why I think it's valuable to talk about both of them, thinking and feeling. And there is some there is some overlap between them that is difficult to untangle, where the thought begins and the feeling ends, and vice versa.
So,
and just to say, so here in this call, in this conversation, I experience what I would consider empathy. And yet this call is filled to the brim with kind of thought energy, thinking energy about what we believe and what is important to us.
Okay, so the first bit was that the thoughts and emotions are distinct, but you're interested in talking about where they meet, where they intersect. And then the second part was that in this call there is empathy and there's a lot of thought at the same time.
Yeah, my experience is that thinking without feeling is meaningless, and feeling without thinking is blind. So it's something that I am continually integrating inside myself. What are the thoughts that I'm having, and how do I feel about it? And what are the thoughts that I'm having, and how do I feel about it? So I'm constantly working to integrate both. And yeah, so I get a lot of value from acknowledging my thoughts, acknowledging what I consider facts, and seeing if I'm on the same page with others about it. But I also get a lot of value out of connecting to a really felt sense of my experience. And sometimes that requires, me to get into my body more, get in touch with my sensations, get in touch with the information that's rising up in my emotional thermometer to stay grounded.
So a big exploration for you is this, the thought and the emotions, the body sensations, along with the rational, the more factual, I think you said, realm, and how those two things are feeding each other.
Yeah, and just to end, I'm going to put all of that within the principle of integrity.
And all of that is within that, the principle of integrity that you brought up before.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'm just going to pull the blind down because it's very sunny. Okay, Pavel, would you listen to me?
I would be happy to.
Integrity is a huge word for me too, and lately I've been thinking about it as I've been enjoying thinking about it in terms of the integrity of a structure. Like a jug has integrity, and yeah, maybe start with that.
So integrity is something that occupies your mind on a daily basis recently, and you have been thinking a lot about it.
Yeah, so and when I think about the integrity of a container, it means that the container isn't going to leak. It's doing its job.
So for you, integrity brings and gives structure to whatever it is.
Yeah. And it makes me think of boundaries. Like boundaries in terms of where I end and you begin. And I suppose having had I wonder, is it different for men and women in that sense that I suppose empathy is seen a lot as like women are very encouraged to be empathetic, but we generally have very poor boundaries.
So something that you're curious about is, are the boundaries of where you begin and the other ends are the same for men and women? And I would like to if you can elaborate a bit more, because I don't quite understand.
I think, well, in my own experience and knowing from my friends, we can often get lost in another person's experience and completely forget our own experience. Or not forget, ignore.
Mm-hmm. So with to me it seems that it is important for you to know where your boundaries can extend to, so we don't get lost within the other person's experience.
Yeah, and the integrity is that, I suppose it's something to do with ego, that we need an ego structure in order to function. But also if an ego is too strong, it goes into the realm then of, sorry, it's maybe too abstract. So it's a balance between, I suppose, awareness of self and awareness of other. So it's just about balance between the two, perhaps.
So basically, when it comes to integrity and that it gives us structure, the ego makes the structure more solid, so we don't get lost into the experience, but at the same time, we have to find the balance between the ego and the whole. so we keep that separateness between us and the other.
Yeah. And I'm interested to hear more about this person who was attacking empathy, because a very respected teacher I have, I heard him say, you know, that empathy wasn't the answer. He just went into a little bit about empathy and I didn't understand anything he was saying. So I'm kind of fascinated because I know there's a shadow side to absolutely everything. So maybe this other person had a bad experience, or so I'm quite intrigued by that.
So you're interested to see or hear about the person who wrote the case against empathy, because a teacher of yours mentioned that empathy is not the answer, and you were very confused of what he was saying.
Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you. I'm gonna break the structure a bit because I spoke recently, so I can give this as a speaker, Edwin, for example, if that's okay.
Okay, so then what?
So I hear that you want to break the structure and you want to sort of pass it on to me, and you're wondering if that's okay.
Yes.
Is there more? Oh.
No, go ahead.
Then you can just say, I feel fully heard, and then it's my turn.
Okay, I feel fully heard.
Okay. So I'll speak to Bill.
Listening?
Yeah, that's, you know, it's, for Pavel, you can speak, it's fine. You don't, it would have been fine for him to speak some more. He doesn't have to feel guilty about having had too much of a turn. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, and so you're saying because of the structure that we have, if Pavel wanted to speak, it would have been fine. He's not taking up too much time.
Right. And so I got a whole list of things. There's a lot of stuff coming up. So number one, the Against Empathy book. The author of that book, Paul Bloom, he wrote his first article 5 years ago in the New Yorker against empathy. The first thing I did is I said, Paul, I sent him an email. I want to empathize with you about why you're against empathy. Can we do an empathy circle so I can empathize with you? And he said, I don't have time. And I've been trying for 5 years to have him take part in an empathy circle. And so he won't talk to me.
So you were the Paul Bloom who wrote this article against empathy. You wanted to have an empathy circle with him, and he says, I don't have time.
Right.
So you've been trying to get him into an empathy circle for 5 years.
And he wrote a book. It's a whole book. It's a whole series of articles, a book, and then all kinds of talks. So, and he's from Yale University. So he's got a big microphone because he's from, so-called elite university.
So he also expanded these articles into a book, and then he's from Yale University. So he has a certain amount of gravitas.
Yeah. And, I couldn't understand what the heck he was talking about. And finally, after, digging, I understand what he's criticizing. And there's all these vague understandings of what empathy is, the definition, and it just creates all kinds of confusion. So for me, empathy is what you're doing. You're sort of sensing, feeling into my experience. So that's for me what empathy is. And so if I'm really angry, like, oh, I'm pissed off, it's like you say, oh, I hear you're pissed off, and you stay with me, and I keep going deeper. His definition of empathy is if I'm all mad, and then you go, I'm all mad too. So he's talking about state matching or a sympathetic state matching. I don't even consider that empathy. If I get angry and then you get angry, that's what he's calling empathy. And I think he misunderstands empathy. So we're talking about two different things.
So you're talking about what he says. So basically, he boiled down. It was very difficult to see exactly what he was criticizing, but what you interpreted is that he was talking about state matching. So in other words, if somebody gets angry, you get angry, which you don't see as empathy, but rather if you get angry and I'm empathizing, then I acknowledge what you're feeling as you can go, but I don't have to match your state or be in the same state. And so therefore there's a difference.
Yeah, and in fact, that sympathy or that sympathetic mirroring, like that can be a block, because then if I am like sad, oh, my, family member died, and then you start going into grief and say, oh, my family member died too, you're shifting the awareness from me initially to you. And so it's like it's taking the empathic awareness away. So yeah, so anyway, we're talking about it. So there's all these subtle things that are happening, and it's a mess in academia about really these nuances, but they have a huge difference in the felt experience.
Yeah, so you're talking about the difficulty in academia of trying to define empathy, and that even reflecting, if you are experiencing grief and I come back with you and telling you about some sort of same experience that I felt in grief, then I'm shifting the emphasis from you to me, and that's not what empathy is.
Yeah, but we can do that in the circle. You stay with me until I feel heard, and then we shift to you. So we're going back and forth. So I see that's what the empathy circle holds, is a sharing of the going back and forth and fully listening to each other. So that's yeah. So yeah, so that's.
Okay, so in the empathy circle, what you're saying is that there can be a sharing when it's your turn to speak, but that process is kind of drawn out, and then the person who's speaking really, the listener is really, focused on them.
Yeah, and I've been calling it academic empathy. It's all these academics writing papers about empathy, and they'll never do it. It's like talking about dance. They're all talking about dance, but they won't get on the dance floor and dance. It's like, come on, Paul Bloom, let's go dance. Let's empathically, let's have a dance. So I feel frustration about it, and it's, it's just more academic empathy. So
yeah. So you're having frustrated with what you're calling, academic empathy, which is an attempt to almost over-define it. It's almost like if you're, walking towards a door and you're going halfway, you're very well defining it, but you never get to the door. So you're saying, go, let's dance, let's empathize, and then talk about it, experience.
Yeah. So it sounded like that was my time.
Yeah.
I feel heard, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Got a ton more to say.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Okay, James, would you listen to me?
Yes, listening.
All right, so I agree as far with Edwin a great deal about this. I remember that, we were talking about this earlier, and he was saying that, like the torturer empathizes with that's an exquisite form of torture, when the torturer empathizes with the torturee, or uses empathy to gain insight as to how they might be most painful to the person that they want to torture. I'll stop there.
All right, so you're raising the example of the torturer who uses empathy for nefarious reasons, to empathize with the person they're torturing, to use that knowledge against them.
Right, which is, I believe, one of the arguments. I didn't read it, but we were discussing that, and that was. My response to that is that if you're torturing, empathizing, if you're really empathizing, you'd realize, oh, stop torturing me. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you don't think it's real empathy. If it was real empathy, it would move the person to act differently, to stop torturing.
Right. So one of the things that we talk about is mutuality, just to get back to the principles, and that is that we live in a shared experience. And so that's one of the reasons we have, so mutuality is sort of our value, and one of the principles that we employ is the 5-minute time limit, but basically a time limit to make sure that everybody gets heard. I'll stop there.
Value of empathy, culture, is mutuality, for example, timing, sharing
Mhm.
time, sharing power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, in the criticisms of empathy, there's somehow you give something to somebody else and you lose something. In other words, this academic definition of empathy is almost a zero-sum game. You know, that there's somebody's gaining and losing, rather than what my felt experience is that not only as I give something to someone else, I realize a shared human experience, and I actually become more capable rather than yet less capable. So it's not a zero-sum game. Actually, it fosters mutual growth. That's a tough one, James. I know you'll do well.
Yeah, so it's this idea of empathy being a zero-sum game where if you give empathy, you're losing something, versus it being, I don't know, an abundance creator where you give empathy and then by virtue of giving, you even get something.
Right, right. And I think that follows basic principles of physics, actually, because we live in an expanding universe. And so if we expand our consciousness, we're sort of, in harmony with that. And that means also breaking down our own barriers. I'll stop there.
You see a parallel in the laws of physics where I think you said the universe is expanding, or a conscious, universe is expanding. So when we expand our consciousness, we break through barriers. We expand beyond certain barriers, and then through that, things are created and expanding opportunities and access to resources, perhaps.
And just on an experiential level, when I talk about experience, I go kayaking. I'm in nature a lot, and so I interact. I keep a respectful distance, but I interact with animals. I've been paddling near whales, orcas, sea lions, and things like that, and I kind of expand, what they're doing, and animals, when God, I'm kind of lost here. It's very hard to explain this. Basically, but by feeling into the animal's experience, I can then interact harmoniously with the animals around me. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so
then my time's up.
When you go into nature, paddling, kayaking, you maintain a respectful distance to the animals, but you take in the information about their presence, and you have a sense that it's like you're meeting the animals and creating like a connection that is impacting both the animals and you in a positive way.
Thanks, James. I feel fully heard. Thank you very much.
Edwin, would you listen to me, please?
Listening.
Yeah. I took a quick look at the Wikipedia page for Paul Bloom's book and saw immediately that the name of the book is a misnomer. It's really should be called Clarifying the Definition of Empathy, because he's clearly not against empathy. He's pointing out cases which are mistakenly thought to be empathy, but are not. And I see a lot of value in doing that. I definitely see a distinction between, for example, having an emotional reaction to something like pity or sadness, and then feeling compelled to act without thinking, versus allowing the feelings to come up in me, but then containing them, and then using my rational mind to make a decision, which is what I hear him supporting that we do. For example, I might be walking down the street and see, a homeless woman sitting on the sidewalk, And if I didn't have access to my rational mind, I may have this overwhelming kind of flood of compassion that comes up in me, and then just give away all my money, give away all my possessions. But I have something, you know, I have a rational mind that says, well, I don't know if I want to do that. Actually, that would leave me homeless. I don't know how it would help the world to just give everything away. Maybe it would. Maybe it would, you know, just give everything away on a whim, and that would be a good thing, and maybe not. And so that for me is the distinction that is being made. This kind of thoughtless, reactive response to whatever feelings I have, which is not what I would call empathy. And I'm glad that it came up in Bill's example, because Bill said if it was real empathy, the person torturing would stop. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here, but I want to make a distinction between acting and empathy. So it's not necessarily true for me that if I have an experience of empathy, that I then act. And I've had countless of examples of that where, you know, I said to someone, hey, this is my situation. And they said, you know, I really hear you. And then I said, well, can you do something about it? And they said, no, I'm not going to do anything. And I've had to really get clear and realize, you know, there's a difference between people understanding me, listening to me, and then necessarily like joining my team and doing what I'd like them to do. It's not the same thing. And so I have come to really respect that it's valuable for me, for someone to hear me and not necessarily do anything. I don't know what they'll do.
Can I reflect that?
Yeah.
Quite a bit there. So the first part I was hearing is you did look into Paul Bloom and what he was, you know, talking about. And you think what he's doing is actually clarifying what empathy is. And you see that as a real contribution. And let me see, so it was, there's this aspect of that if you have feelings that just arise and you just act on them, for example, if you see someone that's homeless and, you know, you feel a sense of sorrow or care for this person, that you would, you know, just give all your money to them if you just acted on that. But you're saying that what he's talking about, and maybe what you see as the values, you have sort of a rational mind, you can sort of evaluate those and just think about what the consequences are in the larger picture, and then, you know, so you have that part that you value, that reason, being able to evaluate your actions. And there's also a difference between empathizing and taking an action. That there's somebody you can empathize with someone, understand where they are, but that's different from you actually taking an action that maybe they expect or want, or vice versa. You could be taking an action.
Absolutely. And I think that really builds on what I had said before about wanting to integrate my thinking and my feeling and not just be in my feelings. So
so it kind of relates to this the thinking and feeling, and just not feeling, but integrating that thinking and feeling. So it kind of relates to that, and maybe an appreciation that maybe that's what Paul Bloom is addressing too.
Yeah, he's selling books. He needs to make provocative book titles as well. So
yeah, so it's part of the against empathy is provocative, is going to sell books. So yeah. Right. So I'll speak to Pavel then.
Yes, I will be happy to.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the feeling awareness. I would like a better term for that, but so I'm just going to go back to that notion of an awareness of the felt experience.
So you would like to explore more about what you have in mind about the felt experience.
And the part that I'm looking at is that our thinking, our reason have a feeling. they're not like separate things that are outside of our body, but they have a felt experience to it. So when James is talking about seeing this feeling, you know, for this person that's maybe homeless, feeling of, you know, compassion or warmth or care, and then he has this reason, the reason has feelings too. The reason has a felt experience to it.
So, simply said, you think that our rational mind is also driven by feelings.
It is a feeling. It has feeling to it. I did an empathy circle on what does reason feel like? And it was really interesting because what does reason feel like to you? It's not like this thing that is like a supernatural force. I mean, that's how a lot of this reason, you know, philosophy is. It's almost like God. Reason is this force outside of us, and it kind of floats outside, and it has no feeling, it has no quality. It's just this God. And I'm saying, and I think it's that reason has a feeling. It has, and I've asked people, what does reason feel like to you? And they say, oh, it feels secure. It feels good. It feels, you know, yeah.
So reasoning has a feeling to it, and it's part of a bigger whole. And so what people often describe it as a feeling of safety, being secure.
That's been one thing someone said, for example. Yeah, it's not that every, you know, yeah. If you just reflect that last piece back. Just one person said that,
yeah.
Not a lot of people. Just want to be sure.
And yeah, just only one person said that it brings them a sense of security.
So what I do notice in the empathy circle, if we can name a feeling, like you're listening to me, you're reflecting what I say, but if you can identify the feeling that I'm having in the moment, maybe like, oh, you feel really excited. I hear you feel really excited about these ideas, that actually helps me to move forward in my growth. And I notice it with others too. If I can identify, even if they don't name the feeling, if I can name it or even take a stab at it, it helps sort of move the energy forward. So it seems the felt experience is very important, I see, for that, for growth.
So you think that if we manage to identify the feeling the speaker is feeling, it will help him to move forward, even if we don't say it.
Yeah, if they didn't say it. So I think I'm feeling kind of excitement around, you know, this thought. So if somebody said, "Oh, I hear you're feeling excited," I just would have an effect on me.
And you're feeling excited right now?
Yeah, I'm really excited. See, that kind of opens it up. I hear it, and it creates space for it to get even bigger.
So you needed that excitement to open up.
I need to hear it. Yeah, when I hear it reflected, it kind of creates space for the feeling to get bigger and sort of flow, you know. So
when you feel heard, it allows you to expand.
Yeah, and then like the next thing will come up. You know, it's like, what's the next feeling? So anyway, it's that aspect between this idea between reason and feeling. I think it's more complicated than that because the reason, the thinking has feeling to it. Like if you're, yeah, so it's I think that's just so important that the thinking, and it has different feelings connected with it.
Mm-hmm. So you think the connection between feeling and reasoning, or feelings and rational mind, there is more to it. There's much more emotions involved.
It's not emotion, it's feelings. I'm just trying to get away from the word emotions. There's a felt experience to the reasoning. Yeah.
There's more felt emotion.
No, there's a feeling, not emotion. I didn't say emotion. I said there's a feeling associated with reason.
Yes, there's more feelings associated with the reason.
Yes, I feel heard. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So to begin with,
Who are you speaking to?
Yes. Bill, would you listen to me?
Happily, sure.
So Bill mentioned that empathy involves action. So if you really empathize with someone, there should be action to it. However, James disagreed with that. And I think that empathy may lead to action, but it doesn't have to lead to action. And what actually helps you to move towards action is that compassion part, compassion. So it's empathy and compassion. But empathy on its own does not necessarily move you into action to do something.
So you were talking about a difference between James and myself, where I said empathy moves into action. James said it doesn't necessarily do that. And what you're saying is that the bridge between empathy and action is compassion, and that's what then moves you to. But it doesn't necessarily always mean that if you feel empathic that you have to act on it.
Yes. And then also James said that empathy does not necessarily need to arise a feeling. And Edwin said that that feeling, I might be wrong, might not remember correctly, but there has to be that feeling to it. And at the same time, Edwin spoke about Paul Bloom, that how he talks about you feeling the feeling that the speaker is feeling. So at the same time, it's not you feeling the same feeling, and on the other hand, and at the same time, it is. I kind of feel confused about that. Mm-hmm. In what Edwin supports exactly.
Okay, so you're talking about two is somewhat of a paradox there, and that one is thinking without feeling is what is empathy, and then also what Edwin talked about is the feeling of reason or the thinking. So reason and sort of thinking combined, and you're not quite sure. You're kind of struggling with that as to how they all fit together.
Yes.
Or don't.
And then also something interesting that James mentioned in the beginning was thinking without feeling and feeling without thinking. Mm-hmm. So he said thinking without feeling is meaningless, and feeling without thinking it's lying to yourself, kind of. Mm-hmm. And basically we should strive to think and feel, so have that rational mind. Mm-hmm. To direct our actions.
So you're talking about what James said and how important it is to both think and feel using your reasoning mind and also your felt experience at the same time, integrate them in order to make an effective or a response.
Yes. So I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, you have a little bit more time. Anything else?
I'm just eager to hear what other people will say on the subject, okay, so, if they choose to reflect on them.
Okay, so you're eager to hear what other people have to say. Okay, great. Aoife, would you listen to me?
Yeah, I'm listening.
So I know that people have said that sort of, heard what I said is sort of like, if you empathize and then you need to act, and versus empathy doesn't necessarily lead to action. Well, I agree with that second premise. It doesn't necessarily. And it's not necessarily a black and white situation. I empathize, therefore I have to act, or I empathize, therefore I don't need to act. But when it comes to torture, just like I kind of referred about Brennan's reflection on pornography, it's time to stop. I'll go out on a limb. If it's that, you know, I mean, you're really talking about, you know, harming another individual very seriously. It's time to act. I'll stop there.
So you're agreeing with what other people have brought up, that empathy can lead to action or it may not, and that's it's fine with you. But when it comes to harming, when it comes to, you know, harming other people, then you believe it's time to act, that empathy would motivate action.
Right, because an empathic view of the world isn't doesn't lead to you know, harming others, you know, in such an explicit way. I mean, I think that we all, you know, we're all imperfect, as you said. There's a shadow side to everything, but when it comes to things like torture, you know, it's time to take a stand. I'll stop there.
So you're acknowledging that we are all imperfect, and I don't know if I'm 100% sure with what you're saying. So that empathy in the face of violence or harm of other people would necessitate the ceasing of the harm. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in a situation of a torture, you know, I mean, people don't always have the power, or, you know, I can see in extenuating circumstances where people just can't act, or if they act, they would then harm other people. And, you know, there are all sorts of crazy things about that. You know, with that stupid a speeding train is going to kill one person, but if you don't do it, you know, 100 people will die. They always give you some kind of crazy stuff like that. Don't worry about reflecting that. But I mean, in other words, people make these absurd kind of hypotheticals. But all I'm saying is that there's a gray area, and sometimes you can empathize and not act, and sometimes empathy demands action, I believe. I'll stop there.
So taking it out of the hypothetical, you're talking about on a actual felt experience basis, that there can be gray areas, but generally empathy will lead to action, like protective action.
In extreme circumstances, yes. And I think that, like, the shadow side of empathy is sort of like when you use it to deflect engaging with someone. And the example I use for that is sort of like if I go to my wife and I say, can I, you know, give you a hug? And she doesn't hug me, but she says, I hear you want to give me a hug, and doesn't hug me. And so that's sort of like using empathy or the tool as a sort of distancing measure rather than to feel in. I'll stop there.
So expanding on that, the kind of gray area with all of this, that that empathy could be used as or the language of empathy could be used as a means of distancing. And you have the example of somebody saying they want a hug, and then the other person saying, you want a hug.
Right, just reflecting that. Thank you, Aoife. I feel fully heard.
Thanks, Phil. James, would you listen to me?
Yes, listening.
I tend, when I start thinking like this, conversation, stop it, because it can make me feel nauseous. So maybe start with that.
Yeah, so this kind of thinking sometimes makes you feel nauseous, and so when you find yourself doing it, you stop.
Yeah, not that it's, you know, I can see value in it, but it's a bit like what the image that keeps coming to me, and it ties in with what Edwin was saying. It's like dancing, and I just have to lift up the cat. Yeah. I learned how to jive last year, and you know, at some point you just have to stop thinking, otherwise it's not going to work. And in this process, it does. What I was thinking was, I don't know what it is, but I like it. You know, which is probably a bit simplistic, but something is happening. And if you keep intellectualizing, you could break it.
So it's like Edwin said, it's similar to dancing, that overthinking it makes it harder to do. And you're also concerned that if you think about it too much, it breaks it. You just know you're doing this thing and you like it. It just feels good. It works at an intuitive level.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable. And I think that's why because a lot of my practice is solitary. And the shadow side of that is that you do, well, maybe it's not a shadow side, like it's the point of other people. It's why other people exist for this, like there's some magic that happens in this process. And I'm doing this on purpose to try and kind of bring something else in.
So other people exist for like connecting in a different way. And you're doing it right now. You want to bring in a different energy into the group right now.
Yeah, and listening even to your birds is very nice. That animals really help me, like what Bill was saying, that years ago, when I tried to connect to animals and I was too self-conscious, they didn't want to be around me, like wild animals. But now I'm not so self-conscious. They're quite comfortable with me. There's something about self-consciousness. So maybe a value, the opposite of self-consciousness would be selflessness.
Yeah, so you hear the birds in my background, and that's helping you to connect to yourself right now and to the group. And in general, animals, connecting with animals is something that you're able to do when you're selfless and not self-conscious.
And at the same time, you're very present. So it's like, you know, what Bill was talking about his kayak experience, that you're turning up raw and vulnerable just by you being there. You're willing to be present. Like we all turned up for this meeting. And in that, there's a vulnerability that you're saying, I'm a me, I'm here. And there's a sense of respecting that you're you and you're here.
So there's something that happens when we show up in our body to a call like this, or when we show up, that brings, we bring ourselves in whoever we are and however we are there, and that has value.
Thanks, James. I feel fully heard.
Havel, would you listen to me, please?
I would be happy to listen to you.
Yeah. So again, on this topic of integrating, I often have an experience that when I'm with my empathy friends, I have a heavy rational side to me that is different. And on the other end, when I'm with my science rational friends, I am bring too many icky, inconvenient feelings for them. They would like to block that out.
So you can see a difference in your rational response when you're with the group, with your empathy friends, and with your other friends.
Yeah. And so I love what I hear Aoife describing, just that total in the present embodied experience that I imagine with animals or in nature or just in play, you know, this direct connection and forgetting myself, forgetting the self-conscious part of myself. Really enjoy that at times. And I also know the real value and joy in getting into a very detailed philosophical discussion about moral dilemmas, like I'm a doctor and I have a family. Do I want to go to the hospital and help people? Is that more empathic? Or do I want to take care of myself and not risk getting coronavirus infected into my family? Is that the more empathic? And it's not clear, and I have empathy, and I don't know what decision to make.
So you can relate to Aoife. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it right. You can relate to her about being empathic with the animal and becoming one with its being and losing yourself into it. At the same time, you kind of find it difficult to see which would be the more empathic decision, whether to go and help in the hospital or stay with your family where your family needs you. And you wonder which would be the more empathic decision.
Not exactly. It's not so much, it's that I also enjoy that kind of philosophical inquiry. I think that that has value.
So you enjoyed the philosophical aspect and discuss it.
Yeah.
Discuss that type of.
Like for me, all of the questions coming up in this circle are alive, relevant, meaningful, and don't necessarily have clear answers. And so I enjoy simply engaging with people in the inquiry.
So you can see how the things we're discussing are alive and of importance, but they don't necessarily have answers to them. And you enjoy being part, discussing them.
Yeah, and also this medium for me kind of favors the intellectual side. We could make it more about feelings, but we're kind of these disembodied heads. And, you know, we could like look into the camera and try to look into each other's eyes and have a more embodied sense experience here, but it's not going to come up to, you know, the level of dancing or being, you know, riding a horse. That's going to be different.
So
I'll say it again, this medium of Zoom and on the computer kind of favors getting intellectual because we're kind of a disembodied head and shoulders.
So this medium favors us to use more our minds than if we were in person and more of our feelings would have been involved otherwise.
Yeah, a little bit, but I can still, you know, I can still be here and connect to just being. And that I see the value in that as well, without getting too into the weeds with intellectual discussion.
Mm-hmm. Although that it has its disadvantages, you still enjoy the being of it.
Yes, yes. Just like Edwin said, wherever I'm thinking, I have feelings. I'm bringing feelings with me. Yeah.
So you agree with Edwin that whenever you're thinking, you're feeling, you're bringing the feelings with you.
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you. Edwin, would you listen to me?
Yep, listening.
I said it in the last empathy circle. Like I'm new to all of this, and I can definitely see the difference between normal conversation and empathic conversation. And at the moment, I'm sweating. I'm trying to really use my mind to go within and try to understand. And I can somehow relate to what Aoife said, that it may bring some type of discomfortness or anxiousness, but it feels good. And I think we're just not used to listening to each other. And because we're a bit unexperienced, it brings us that feeling.
Mm-hmm. So like with what Aoife is saying is that there's a discomfort in doing this empathic listening because we're not used to it. So there's a discomfort, but there's also some kind of positive feelings as well. And you're just, we're identifying that you're actually sweating. I don't know if it's because of what you're doing here, and they also just acknowledging that you're new to this too.
Well, maybe discomfort would be the wrong word, but I can definitely see how I'm using more of my mind in the conversation than I would in a normal conversation. And it's challenging to me. I can see it as a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. So here you're really using your thinking and your mind for what we're doing here, and it is there is a challenge to it.
Mm-hmm. And I also liked what Aoife said about willingness as a value and willingness to be present with the individual in front of you and the whole group at the same time.
And you have some resonance with what Aoife was saying about just being present with others, and perhaps the feeling of that, and the maybe the value in that presence.
And I also wonder how, when you reflect when someone speaks, what is the processes that occur within your minds? For example, such as James and you and Bill, because I can see that you're more experienced, you reflect with ease, and I think something is happening. You have like this matrix, bigger picture.
Uh-huh.
I really wonder what's the process.
Yes, there's a real curiosity. You see that we've done this a lot, and there's a certain ease to it. but you're really wondering, like, what's going on in our minds? Like, what are the dynamics of what's going on in our minds, and what's really happening? So feeling a real curiosity about that.
Yes, and also I'm really fascinated with Bill because sometimes he manages to reflect much better than I expressed myself. So he adds much more than what I said, and he brings a better understanding to the subject.
So you're just noticing that Bill, when he does a reflection, sometimes he's even adding a better explanation or articulation of what you're saying, even better than you were able to say yourself, and just sort of noticing, maybe even maybe feel some appreciation for that.
Yes, and the trainings are yet to begin as a facilitator, and I hope to start holding empathy circles. But I wonder, for those that are new to this, how can I make this process easier so I don't make them feel anxious? What would be the possible steps that I should walk them through? So I build on each session instead of being hardcore from the very first session.
Mm-hmm. So you're wanting to facilitate empathy circles, and for new people, you really want to make them feel at ease and not have anxiety. And you're wondering, like, what can you do to really make their experience a positive experience versus being full of anxiety? And what steps can you take to put them at ease? So maybe you have some concern for their well-being.
Yes. And at the same time, I can see how we deviated from the main topic, from discussing values to discussing other things, although that it's nice to discuss them. I enjoyed it very much to hear your various opinions, and thank you.
Yeah, so you're feeling grateful for the discussion, and that you've noticed that we've maybe deviated from the topic of the values of a culture of empathy, but you're enjoying where the conversation has been going.
Yes, thank you very much, Edwin.
Okay. Well, there's just 1 minute left. So maybe I'll speak to Bill.
Listening?
Just to fill the time. Yeah, there's a whole bunch I'd love to still say, you know, that whole thing about the tortures and empathic action. You know, I just feel like full of sort of stuff that it's all, yeah, what I'd really love to get it out, but there's not enough time, always running out of time.
So you're feeling that you're full of all sorts of creative ideas, but there's not enough time.
Yeah, the one thing is that about empathy, a lot of times it seems like empathy is this thing that's not action. I like to make the case that empathy is perhaps one of the most powerful actions that you can take. Just to sit and listen to someone has huge effect on people. You know, if a person is stressed, a lot of cortisol, you know, stress hormones in their body, you listen to them, the cortisol goes down, the oxytocin goes up, and that's a huge action, you know, so it's not some neutral thing that has no action. So I really want to make that point.
So you wanted to make the point that the empathic listening is an action in and of itself that has profound effects upon the person who's being listened to.
And quickly, the torturer and torturee scenario, it's usually like this individualistic model. But if we're looking at a culture of empathy, it's about a relationship, and it's about a negotiation of what action we're going to take. So it's like the torture. Yes, I would like to torture you because I really want to get this information from you. And the torturee, well, I hear you'd really like to get this information from me, and that's why you want to torture me. Do you feel heard? He says, yeah, I feel heard. And the torturee says, I really don't want to feel pain. I'm really not into feeling pain. And so it would be an empathic dialogue, and there's that empathic action, right? That we negotiate the action we want to take, and we come to an agreement. So there's something about that empathic action that's I think is sort of the answer to that criticism. Yeah.
In using the torturee process, you're talking about two isolated individuals, whereas empathy is action and feeling in relation to. So in that context, torture, it seems, becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, I just hit to close the room, so we got 50 seconds to.
All right,
before.
50 seconds.
So, yeah, so
Get
this,
it?
yeah, this was great. I really enjoyed this conversation. You know, I wish there was a lot more times. I got so much more to say. So, thanks everyone.
So you had a good time and you really enjoyed it, and you want to express your appreciation. But we have a time limit.
Yeah, fully heard. Thanks.
Sure. All right. See you, everybody, in the main room.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, welcome back. We'll wait for everybody to kind of come back in. Okay, I guess we can get started. Welcome back to the full circle. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And I'll just kind of go around, and you can kind of reflect what seemed to be some of the high points. We'll do kind of reflection on that, and take about a minute or so. And I'll just go around my screen. I'll start with Neetu.
Okay, so we had a really good group. 2 people had to drop out, but we were able to talk about mutuality and the benefits of developing the skill of deep listening. So yeah, we discussed the importance of that and how it affects us in this world.
Great, thank you, Neetu. Alex?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to echo that. We had a really great discussion. We touched on like so many principles. I think what I'm taking away from this is that I think the core values and practices that promote a culture of empathy are going to parallel those that promote good emotional health. And self-awareness, so that we know like where our limits are so as not to run into like compassion fatigue and other things. So, you know, making sure that we're able to be healthy in our own emotions, and then we can open up the like our own spheres to take on other people's, to listen to them, to seed compassion and so forth.
Right. Thanks, Alex. Katie.
Yeah, it was a really interesting conversation, actually. I'm still thinking about it, processing it. But yeah, we talked a lot about boundaries when you're empathizing. I don't know, it's interesting because if you're empathizing, in a sense, how do you keep your boundaries? I suppose it's knowing when you are at a point where you can't empathize, recognizing that in yourself. And the question of whether empathy is about feeling. But then how much can you feel before it becomes about you? And where's the line, really? I find that interesting. Yeah, it was really good. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Food for thought, I'm sure. Pavel.
To me, empathy, it's not about feeling. It may involve feeling. This is something we also discussed in the group. But there's so much on my head that I don't know what to say, so I'll just pass. Sorry about it.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing, Pavel. Great. You were in my circle, and I really appreciated your contributions. James?
Yeah, we discussed integrity and integrating thinking and feeling, and we discussed a lot about the definition of empathy. The case against empathy by Paul Bloom came up, which I'm happy about. I think as someone interested in philosophy, I see great value in clarifying our definitions, which is how I understand his book. And yeah, generally it was a meaningful, fun session. That's it.
Thanks a lot, James. Edwin?
Yeah, I love this inquiry. I'm looking forward to the ongoing inquiry about what a culture of empathy is. This was sort of an open, discussion where everybody could bring in their own ideas or their own values. The one that I've been exploring is empathy is feeling into. So there's a term I'm still looking for is feeling awareness, an awareness of the felt experience, to be sensitive to what am I feeling now? What is the group sort of feeling? What's the group energy? What are other people? I'm seeing AC Alex shake his head. I feel that acknowledgement. I feel like I can feel the acknowledgement, but I'm looking for a better word for it. But right now I'm just sitting with that word, feeling awareness, and because empathy is in feeling, so you got to be able to feel, be sensitive to felt experience and the importance of that. So yeah, I'm really excited about this inquiry. I'm so glad we're going to be working on this for a while. And I hope we can sort of capture, the insights here and, create some kind of a document, or I don't know, create a book or something. I don't know. So, yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you. Aoife.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground and going into the different values, and then it could have gone off in lots of different really fascinating pathways. The one thing that was coming up for me at the end, because this thing came up about the torturer and the torturee, and the empathy, how empathy could lead to action or not lead to action. And it reminded me of a story in nonviolent communication. I did the training, and then in the book, he relates the story of a teacher who actually has a knife to her throat. And she just knows that she needs to empathize with this person. And she's saying, it seems like you're angry right now, you're really upset, so empathy as a as a life-saving tool. And that came up for me, so I thought I would put that in there at the end.
Thank you, Aoife. Anne?
Yeah, quite a lot of interesting things came up. Take too long to go through them all, I think, but I think one of the things that was acknowledged was that if we had a culture of empathy, it would be quite different to the culture in which we live now, and that we need to, kind of upskill ourselves back to being probably what would come much more naturally to us, but we're so used not to experiencing much empathy that we develop all these methods of like self-talking in our heads because we don't get listened to, and how that transition, we talked a bit about that transition as well as elements of it. So there was quite a lot that came in our group. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Anne. Brian?
Yes, this was amazing. Thank you for hosting this. What I'm left with is the words felt sense. Like, to me, in order for this to spread, at least in my circles, the felt sense of being with someone and someone mattering is a very powerful word. And so I'm passionate about suicide prevention. And so how, like in a culture of empathy, to me, suicide doesn't exist because I feel with you. And when we can create a felt sense of that, like effective empathy rather than just the cognitive, it's like it goes beyond repeating back what someone says. It goes way beyond that. I have to feel with you, as Carl Rogers, I guess, was pointing out. So how to create that is what I'm left with. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Sarah?
Yeah. Hi. We also had a really great circle, and I was left with realizing the importance of each of us mattering, that each of us matters to each other, and that our culture isn't based on empathy. And also to kind of let go of that we all have an internal dialogue and a bias, and so we're not always present, and we're also not connected to our own self-awareness, that our own capacity to and life experience is what makes the container of safety for another. It informs how we relate to another.
Thank you, Sarah. Ben?
Yeah, I experienced the topic of connection with people in the group, different ways of connecting, ways that sort of like block connection, and ways that connection, people can come together and almost like spread, yeah, a sense of connection.
Thanks, Ben. I had a wonderful circle, lots to think about. And what we talked about is the kind of the reasoning or the thinking part of empathy, and then the felt experience. And I really was sort of getting how it has to be integrated, how you kind of feel empathy. It's not adequate to simply define it intellectually or just to talk about a feeling. Somehow you have to come together and integrate it. Well, thank you very much. I want to invite you in a half an hour, if you're working on facilitating or facilitator circle, to join us at the same Zoom room. We have a facilitators meeting, and in this today you'll have 15 minutes to talk about whatever kind of facilitation circle projects you have. You can also, if you're a new facilitator or you're taking the training, you can kind of listen in and see what people are doing and gain some experience that way. And then also on tomorrow, Saturday, we have the XR principles. I believe we're going on to the demands tomorrow. And
it's principle 11. What principle would you suggest?
Okay. Sorry. So it's there are 10 principles of XR, and then we're talking about if you could, principle 11, what principle would you suggest? Stimulating conversation tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time on this Zoom room. So I don't want to take, Edwin, yes.
Oh, I just wanted to add about the training. I created a Facebook event for the training, and I put the link in there. A lot of people here have signed up there. You can go in and add your name, sort of a staging ground for space for getting involved in the Empathy Circle facilitator training. One of the steps is to take part in these circles, so you're all on the track to be trained just by taking part here. Also, in future cafes, empathy cafes here, you can, as part of the training, you can facilitate some of the breakout rooms, like Neetu was facilitating, and so others who are in the training, this will be a space for you to sort of practice that training, and we're going to be forming cohorts, training cohorts. There's a couple going now, and we'll be forming some new ones shortly. And then the facilitator support group is part of that sort of process too. So I just wanted to mention that. That's it.
Sure. Thanks, Edwin. Yeah, I'm doing a facilitation training, and it's really very enjoyable. So with that, I want to give everybody a chance to get a bio break and get some, do what they need to do. And I hope to see you in a half an hour, if not in future empathy circles. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Bill, for hosting.
Thanks.
Great. Do you want to check in about anything, Edwin, or just?
I think we're good. Unless Neetu, do you have any sort of as a facilitators, any feedback, any just as a?
Yeah. Was I supposed to record?
You didn't have to, but we might in the future. Maybe we'll record. We're starting this new series on the values, and I think it would be great to have recordings of those as. Just as for documentation. It's very rich, and we're kind of building this culture of empathy, and to be able to record these dialogues you know, you don't have to, but you know, maybe
I was
we could.
actually trying to, but it said, please request permission from the host.
Oh, yeah, I need to
So
set that,
I
so
didn't
I'll
know how
remember
to do
that,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So yeah, I'd be happy to record next time. I just once I realized, oh, I didn't ask, and then yeah, that little symbol came up. Please request from the host.
Yeah, that was my fault for not
No,
giving you the
that's
permission,
okay.
making a notice. So yeah. So how was the circle otherwise? How'd it go? You had Courtney, who's from Berkeley, going to be doing that research. I was wondering how her experience was.
Yeah, no, it was really good.